Kia ora koutou, nō mai haere mai ki te tēnei hui. Welcome to the annual budget hearings for Palmerston North City Council 2022-23 year. This is our 7th session, or technically session 7, our last session of this round, listening to submissions on our annual budget. My name is Councillor Dingwall and I will be your chair for this afternoon. And so we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping to start with. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on the Council's website. It's also being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. So there are opportunities to have a look at it later on if you wish. We'll just go through the health and safety requirements for the chamber, for those of you who are unfamiliar. We've got emergency exits on both sides of the chamber at the moment. There is, so they're on the screen at the moment. If you hear an alarm, please leave the site immediately to the nearest fire exit. And we'll evacuate to the assembly area, which is the clock tower in Te Maraeohine, the square. This is a non-smoking building, and there is a defibrillator located at the front of house on the ground floor. Alrighty, so while Palmerston North is at the COVID-19 protection framework, orange setting, we are asking everyone to continue to follow public hygiene measures. We currently have some elected members in the chamber and some elected members online as well. For those of you who are online, we ask that you keep your cameras turned on and microphones muted unless you're addressing the meeting. Councillors in person will be able to use their voting devices to ask a question, and I think for voting we'll use a show of hands, because that'll be easier for our members online. Alrighty, so we'll start off by taking some apologies. At the moment we've got online Councillor Johnson, Councillor Naylor and Councillor Mickelad. For apologies, we currently have the Mayor and Councillor Harpiter. Are there any other apologies? And Councillor Beattie. Wonderful. Can I have someone to move that? Councillor Hancock, seconded by Councillor Butt. And then we'll go to the screen to do a show of hands for voting. So, wonderful. All those in favour? Excellent. That's unanimous. Right. There are no additional items that I'm aware of, and no, are there any declarations of interest? Wonderful, there are no declarations of interest, and so we'll just note the procedure sheet. So all of the submitters would have received a copy of the procedure sheet. There are also hard copies on the table to my right, if you need a copy there as well. So we'll just note that the procedure, that the committee resolves to note that the procedure of the hearing of submissions as described in the procedure sheet. And so I'll ask for Councillor Hancock to move that, and a seconder, Councillor Bowen. And we'll go to a show of hands. We've got people on the screen. Wonderful. All those in favour? Excellent. That's unanimous. Cool. And so, we will now go to hearing of our submitters, and so as I call your name, you'll come up to the microphones and you'll have 10 minutes to speak to your submissions. We've got a traffic light system here on my right, and so you'll have, I think, 7 minutes on green, and then 2 minutes on orange, and then 1 more minute on red. Please, when you're coming up, be aware that all councillors have read your submissions, so feel free to add whatever you want to add to that, but also try and make time for questions as well. So we shall start with submitter 296, which is Robert Dabb. Welcome, Robert. Excellent. Feel free to start when you're ready.
Okay, hey, it's good to be here. First time I've actually been in the council chambers, and by way of introduction, I've studied, lived and played here in Palmerston North for the last 40 years, so I guess about time I got here, but I guess the issue caused me to come. So you'd have read my submission, and so I'll just sort of speak a bit around the background of that. This morning I woke up, like a lot of people, used the loo, had a shower, put our recycling out this morning, and then got on the roads and drove to work. And I appreciate living in a city provides the infrastructure to enable me to do that. And as a result, we pay $2,845 a year in rates. Live down in the Parkland area. Now, when I look at the proposed changes to rating, I'll be paying just over $3,000 next year, so a 9.5% increase. I'm fortunate, I've got a good job, and yeah, while I don't like the 9.5%, I can afford it. It's not going to change my lifestyle a lot. So this submission isn't about me. I've got an elderly friend who lives over in the Takaro area. At the moment she pays about $300 rates less than me. Yeah, probably fair enough. She lives in a poorer quality neighbourhood, older house. You know, streets are a bit more broken and footpaths a bit more uneven. Yet when I look at her rates proposed for next year, instead of paying $300 less than me, she's actually going to be paying $300 more next year. The difference is actually $662 more than what she was paying last year, 25.6%. And that's why I'm here. I think, hey, 25%, I can live with 9%. I can't actually live with 25%. And the people faced with that 25% probably aren't the ones who are submitting in front of you today or this week as well. So I thought I'd compare notes. I thought, well, okay, fair is fair. If I'm up 9 or 10%, I guess others are too. So I picked a couple of suburbs which I'd like to live in one day. So down to Yawi Street on the lagoon. I've got a mate who lives down there. He's done well in business. He's contributed well to society, and he's got a multi-million-dollar house. I thought, gee, he'll be paying heaps more. And at the moment he does. He pays $7,104 in rates. Again, part of New Zealand society is those who have, try and contribute a bit more, so he's contributing a fair share more. Under the proposed scheme next year, you'd think he'd be up a couple of $1,000. That would only seem fair. He can afford it, just like me. His increase is $120 more next year under the proposed rating proposal. He can afford a lot more than $120. So backtrack to my elderly friend in Takaro, she's paying $660 more. So going to be faced with 6 times the increase in rate bills compared to the multi-million-dollar mansion down to Yawi. And there are other houses in that street which I did a random look at are paying anything up to 10 to 15% less rates just because of the rating system. So I'm not a rocket scientist, I'm not a valuer. However, when something doesn't seem right, it doesn't seem right. And to me that doesn't seem right. I know a lot of our rates are based on land values, and land values have skyrocketed the last few years. However, for people just living in a house for paying an extra 25 to 30% rates, that doesn't seem right. I think your job as representatives is to look at the same data I'm looking at and say, well, it doesn't seem right either. The overall rates I can understand needs to increase. We want to keep our city modern and up to date, so 7 or 8% might be fair. It's everyone wants less. But to put that burden unequally across the city, I think, is unfair in its own right. So I've got a couple of solutions for you. And, I mean, none of them are going to be perfect, I know, but maybe it gets the brains thinking. I don't think anyone in the city expects their rates to go down. So that's the first decision I think you should make, is no one should pay less rates than they paid last year. I mean, they're still going to the loo like I am this morning. They're still having a shower. They're still driving down the road. So they're getting no lesser service than what they did when the rates were struck last year. So I don't think anyone expects a decrease. So those that calculate at the moment on a decrease, I think just flat rate it. But likewise, I don't think anyone should be paying 25 or 30% more. Because again, they're doing the same thing that I did this morning as they did last year. So I'd like to see a system work where no one pays any less and no one pays more than 10% than what they did last year. And I think that's quite doable, because your total rates take is aimed to be around about 8.5% increase, unless you make some changes there. So how do you make that happen? Short term, it's real simple. It's simply ignore the 2021 ratings, rateable values, go back to 2018 when they were struck, and just apply a 8% increase or whatever it is across the board there. And meanwhile, you've got a year to work out how to apply 2021 rating information to a fairer rate system. And, that's a different topic. I'm sure people have got ideas on that. But I think just short term, get the income for the council, but spread the load evenly. And an even increase across everybody is way better than some people paying a lot more than some people paying a lot less. So happy to take any questions on my sort of rationale and thinking there. So.
Thanks very much for that, Robert. We do have some questions. We'll start with Councillor Hancock. Oh, no? That's all right. We are using these gadgets, so if you do have a question, do let us know, or wave at me. That's also fine. We'll go online to Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Robert, for your submission. Very helpful. In terms of the way that we rate, do you have a view about land value as a system itself, whether or not you think that that's a reasonable system to be using? So you've talked about the rates being based significantly on land value, but you haven't expressed a preference for another system.
Yeah, I guess I see that as another topic. That's why I suggest that's something over the next year the council can work on. But what's clear is the changes in values in the last 3 to 4 years and meant the land value system's outdated completely now. It's not suitable and not fit for purpose. And I know there are other jurisdictions rating on different systems, but I guess my simple version is people live in houses. So my wife and I, there's 2 of us live in a house, so 2 of us flush the loo. Somebody else might live in a bigger house, so they flush a bigger loo. So, people live in houses, not on their sections. In fact, in some ways, a bigger section is a less draw on the council's stormwater requirements, because we've got more water draining on the section rather than down the concrete. So those bigger sections, maybe they should get a credit for having a bit more bare land. But yeah, definitely think a system change is required.
Okay, thank you. And then you said that you wanted the burden to be fairly shared across the city. Would you see that no one should be paying less rates would apply to commercial sector as well as residential sector? Or are you just talking about the residential sector there?
I'd apply it across all. I'm involved in a business in fielding and commercial, and we don't expect our rates to be going up any higher than anyone else, or down any lower either. So I think it'd be fair to put an increase across everyone. Everyone benefits from what the city does, and so we benefit equally. Maybe we pay equally.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
We've got a question from Councillor Barrett, and also to let you know that the technology isn't working, so do wave at me if you need to ask a question. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Robert, for coming in and having a chat with us. Councillor Johnson actually covered a little bit of the territory I was interested in, but the other question that was on my mind, I haven't been in this community for 40 years. Have you ever seen it like this before in terms of being so uneven?
Not in my experience, but to be honest, I'm probably more an armchair critic after the fact, like a lot of people, and I only sort of caught onto this the day submissions closed. So, yeah, but I certainly haven't seen the same level of disquiet. I've talked to a few other people around who are just as concerned as I am, and some of those, just like me, can afford an increase, but we don't think that there are other people out there who can't afford an increase. If you're on a pension, another $600 a year rates, it has to come out of something. It's not out of thin air.
Thank you for your comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for coming in, Robert Dabb. That is the last question for your session, and we are out of time, but we really do appreciate you putting in your submission. Next up, we have submission number 319, which is the Central Palmerston North Business Improvement District, Inc., Palmy bid, and we have Rob Campbell, the chair. So feel free to start when you're ready.
Are we working? Everyone, first of all, I'd like to say well done to Robert, who was before me. So I talked a lot of sense, that man. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to talk to you late in what I expect has been a fairly taxing week for everyone. As you suggested, my name's Rob Campbell. I'm Chair of Palmy Bid, which, as you know, is an organisation that's funded by and represents the Central City community. I want to talk today about the issues raised in our submission on the annual budget, specifically the Ambassador and the Safe City Host programs. I've spoken about our admiration and support for the Ambassador program to you in the recent past. I'm aware that funding for this program is to be halved as part of the budget in the year ahead, and that concerns me. Palmy Bid has recently accepted responsibility for delivery of the Safe City Host program due to the intended dissolution of the Safe City Host Trust, an organisation that you'll be aware has operated the program for the last 25 years. Although we've accepted responsibility for the program, council funding restrictions have meant that we've had to reduce the level of services the program delivers. We'll be monitoring the program closely, but we take the increased risks to public and contractor safety quite seriously. This appears to us to be a part of a pattern of underinvestment in the safety and security of our city centre, and with it the safety and security of our wider community. This also threatens, we believe, the vibrancy and vitality of the whole city. A visitor to the city might wonder if this is simply us being short-sighted. I understand that the issues are a little bit more complex than that. I know that some will say that the role of security should fall to the police, that it's their problem. I understand that, but I also understand that this is not the 1960s when police resources were vastly greater relative to the size of the population and the nature of crime than they are today. I understand that while we wait for someone else to take ownership, we lose our children to gangs, we put our people at risk, and we discourage investment in the heart of our city. I know that some will say this is an issue of fiscal responsibility, that belts must be tightened. I understand that also, believe me, I do. But the reality is that the combined spend on these programs as they currently stand represents somewhere in the region of $7 in my annual rates bill. Now, you'll allow me a little bit of licence there, around about $7. I don't think there's a ratepayer in this city who would stand beside you and shake your hand for saving them $7 but sacrificing their daughter or their granddaughter. We need perspective. Not all costs are equal. Last Friday, the owner of a shop on Timarai was assaulted by 4 young men. He was thrown to the ground and kicked, and they proceeded to use tables and chairs as weapons to throw at him and his partner. His partner remains badly bruised, but they both survived the incident. The week prior, there was a fight between opposing groups of youths, again in the square. The fight was broken up when gang members supportive of one of the group chased others with machetes. Imagine the consequences of this incident if it led to injury or loss of life. I highlight these not to sensationalise, but to reflect that these problems are with us and will continue to be with us. We cannot afford to be less vigilant than we have been. While we continue to underinvest, we place at risk the lives and livelihoods of our people and the reputation and vitality of our city. On behalf of our community, I again offer Council Bid's help in finding a practical, permanent solution to safety and security in the city centre. We need to view this not as a cost, but as an investment in both our present and our future. I want to make the courtyard of the Daughter of Peace a genuine reality. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rob, for coming in and speaking to us today. We do have a couple of questions. We'll start with Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Rob, for your submission. It's very clear. Just in terms of the City Ambassador Program, you talked in your written submission about the engagement of rangatahi that the ambassadors undertook. Could you just perhaps explain to us all here in terms of what were the issues that were perhaps mitigated through that engagement? What sort of numbers of young people were we dealing with during that particular period? And perhaps just give some indication around in terms of the inclusion of rangatahi into the CBD rather than exclusion.
Yeah, in terms of the numbers of rangatahi touched, that's not a detail that I'm privy to. Council officers, I think, are preparing a report on the program this year, and that will include that. But I do know that the ambassadors reached out, engaged, and involved the rangatahi who were in the Te Reo at the time, involved them in taking ownership of the area and being responsible for not only what they did, but what other people did in the area. We're talking specifically about children who are below the age of 14 and 15, at an age where, you know, the police are, unless they commit serious crimes, the police are essentially powerless. The police are really just an Uber ride home, and they head back into town. So connecting with these children, connecting them at a time where they can be influenced, vitally important. And I think that's the key to the Ambassador Program.
And thank you. And just for clarity's sake, the other incidents that you've actually talked about that have subsequently occurred, the Ambassador Program at the moment is actually not running, is that correct?
Yeah, and I think that's the point that we made in our previous submission to Council. The Ambassador Program currently runs over the summer holiday period. This is just not a summer problem. It's an all year round problem. You know, these kids, their problems don't stop just because the weather turns a little bit colder.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm not quite sure how to perhaps couch this particular question, but in terms of the activity of the ambassadors and their interactions with the rangatahi, would you regard that as foundational prevention and enhancement of perhaps the mana of these young people?
I do see in certain cases that would be the case. The ambassadors are essentially a gateway to other youth services, other social services that might extend not only to these children but to their families. But absolutely, they'll be improving the mana, they'll be improving the outlook of the people they touch.
Great, thank you, Rob. That's very, very helpful. Thank you.
We'll go online for Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Rob, for your submission. Just reflecting on the examples that you've talked about, the violence that's happened in the square, I'm just interested to understand what your expectations are of the role of the police in dealing with this.
Well, I do accept, and the police have been involved in certainly the incident with the shopkeeper. I'm not aware that they were involved with the brawl between the two gangs of youths. Look, I don't think we're here to substitute for the police, but we're here to take a reasonable view that we can assist them in the protection of our community when they're in this area. And look, I don't shy away from the fact that it's their problem, but it is also our problem, and we can't deny that.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Back in the room with Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rob, for your presentation. So Palmy Bid obviously is now funded through a targeted rate that the central city businesses pay. So if council doesn't increase this funding, or in fact the funding decreases through council, is that a programme that the Palmy Bid itself will be prepared to fund?
Councillor, no, I don't think so. We will do what we can to facilitate delivery of any program, but the bid was set up with a number of objectives, but we simply don't have a mandate to take over council costs. We just don't have that mandate.
When you say you don't have the mandate, what?
Well, we're here to engage with council. We're here to allow the community to have input to what's happening in the city centre. We're here to promote the city centre, but we're not here to absorb council costs. That was clearly not in the mandate that the public voted on.
So has there been an opportunity to speak to your membership about whether they would be interested in funding this kind of programme if it wasn't funded somewhere else?
No, there hasn't been an opportunity to speak as yet. Time has been reasonably short, and council decision-making in relation to the ambassador program, I think, is still ongoing. We would, I'm sure, put it to our members. Would they accept? I guess we'd have to wait and see the outcome of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we've got a final question from Councillor Johnson online.
Thanks, Madam Chair, but Councillor Bowen has traversed the question that I had in mind.
Wonderful. Then we might have a final question from Councillor Barrett in the room.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, Rob, a question that I suppose does have some sensitivity around it, but it's really just a question of clarification for me. When some people hear the word rangatahi, they assume it is speaking about young people of Maori descent. When some people hear that word, they assume that it's speaking about all young people and using te reo to express that. And I just wondered which of those two approaches was your intended meaning in terms of...
There are a range of young people involved in it, and I use the te reo simply as an acknowledgement of what is commonly when referring to the use in the situation, but they are from a range of backgrounds.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the clarification. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rob. That is all the questions for today, and thank you very much for your submission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next submission is number 336 from the Manawatu Business Chamber, Amanda Lindsley and Steve Davey.
Good afternoon all. It's very nice to be back here in person again. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, councillors and officers. Thank you for allowing the Manawatu Business Chamber to speak at this annual budget submission today. I have with me Steve Davey, who is the chair of the Manawatu Business Chamber. And as you're aware, our business chamber represents a number of businesses, a lot of businesses with a large number of the region's GDP from across the wider Manawatu region. You'll all have read our submission, so today we're here to highlight some of the key points that we feel are important and to ask you to further reflect on prior to making decisions. The proposed increased rate at 8.3% is higher on average than the LTP at 8.1. This in itself might not seem a significant amount. However, we are concerned that given the difficulties that businesses and individuals have been through in the last couple of years, the signal that an increase is acceptable when others are cutting their costs is not a good message from Council. COVID-19, inflation, interest rates and rising fuel and food prices are putting everyone under significant pressure. Our members also face additional challenges, including labour shortages, compliance costs and supply chain constraints. However, as well, having read all the other submissions, of which there are 340 that I'm aware, it was concerning to read the number of submissions from individuals whose personal proposed rate increase due to their land valuations is very high, as we heard from Rob earlier, and I had obviously no idea that he was going to be speaking on that exact topic, and in some instances over 30%. So whilst we're representing business interests here today, it can't go unnoticed from us that given the large number of submissions from individuals making exactly the same point. Whilst Manawatu Business Chamber have always supported realistic rate valuations and acknowledged the necessity to invest in our infrastructure so as to manage a sustainable future as our city grows, we do feel that because of the above mentioned reasons that Council needs to review this rate proposal and seek to cut costs this year, reflect, review and take stock of where we are. Manawatu Business Chamber would urge you to review your debt servicing, review where savings have been made in the past years through not being able to deliver on capital projects and major events, and review the large number of capital projects that we have underway at various stages, from initial consultation through to implementation, that might be on hold for various reasons or slowed down because of supply chain issues. However, specifically, and we've heard from the Palmy bid from Rob, we're also concerned that the funding for some of the Safe City programmes has been cut, including Safe City Patrol and the Ambassador programme, which has been halved. It's well known that there's been an increase in crime during the last year throughout the city, and to reduce spending in this area at this time does not make sense. This increase in crime has impacted city businesses at a time when they have been hardest hit and does nothing for the reputation of the city. We are aware this is a national problem, but our concern can only be for here and things that we're able to affect in our own city. We believe that this should be a priority and that PNCC should look to tighten its internal budget, potentially with a zero-rated review for the coming year, to reallocate spending to where it's most needed. Budgetary costs from within council could include such things as computer and furniture replacement, which is the best part of $500,000, which we understand. That could go a long way to actually meeting the needs of some of these other projects. We'd really like you to have another look at what that looks like for yourselves. An additional budget for employer remuneration should also be reviewed on an individual basis based on performance this year. We would very keen for you to look at alternative ways to help fund the Safe City programme, and we, as you've heard from Rob with Palmy Bid and Chamber of Palmy Bid, work closely together on a number of projects. We're very keen to see and help Palmy Bid in this space as well, what those things could look like. So we're keen to help and support what that all looks like for us. It is, we agree, and we believe, all of our responsibility, and this isn't just a police issue. Longer term, whilst we are participants in the PNCC Wastewater Discharge Consent Programme reference group, gosh, that's a mouthful, isn't it, and the Wastewater Monitoring Group, we're keen to be kept updated on what Three Waters means for our city in terms of infrastructure ownership and potential costs and potential benefits. Very keen to make sure that that stays on the agenda and that messaging comes out and through to our business community. We're also keeping a watchful eye on the Civic and Cultural Precinct project. And I sat in yesterday and heard the workshop that you were all able to attend. And whilst we may endorse the concept, we feel it is important that costs are clearly articulated and that everybody appreciates this is a long-term plan and a collaboration. At this stage, we're not saying we're in favour or we're not in favour. We don't know. I had more information yesterday than I've actually ever seen and what's been put up online on the website with things we had not seen before. Appreciate council officers' consultation, but please understand when you're talking to us, if you're showing us a high-level plan and you're talking to us and asking us questions, when we haven't got all the information, we're neither endorsing nor not endorsing a project. You're just having a conversation with us. And I did hear yesterday that council officers were asked on a number of occasions about how the engagement was going with Palmy Bid and with Chamber. It's a very early days, so please don't take it from any of those comments that we're in favour or we're not in favour. We're learning, we're finding out. But some of the things that we were quite engaged, or pleased to hear, is that the talk of the private-public partnership and how that could look and how we can take that forward to fund things within that space. And I'm actually going to hand you over to Steve now, who'd like to speak on that.
Yes, thank you, Amanda. So I would just like to encourage the council to be aspirational and to consider new ways of doing things. An example actually occurred in the city this week where we had a KiwiSaver fund in town that's a not-for-profit. They will do community housing. They will build it, they will manage it, and they'll hand the asset over to council or another local organisation in time. They have $5 million every day they receive to invest. They're a not-for-profit. They will make a return for their investors, but ultimately they're looking for opportunities to work with the likes of councils and solve problems. I think instead of just rates being the key solution to problems, I would really encourage us to look further afield for opportunities. KiwiSaver, thanks to probably, I don't know, the last 10 years or so, KiwiSaver is going to be huge for the New Zealand economy in time. We're 10 years behind where Australia is. If you go to Australia, look at the infrastructure there. A lot of that is thanks to public-private partnerships and thanks to the use of KiwiSaver funds. Not just that though, I mean, anybody that drives past Memorial Park on a summer's day saw that every kid in the city was there. That's a great example where you've actually managed to get some additional funding to make something happen. And I think there's plenty of other examples. I know from my football background in Wellington, council there managed to get millions of dollars in funding to build artificial turfs all over that city. It is possible to do things without just collecting rates. And I'd encourage us to actually open your minds to looking and seeing whether more of that can be done for the benefit of the whole city. Thank you.
Thank you both for your submission. We do have a number of questions, so we'll start with Councillor Bowen, hoping for succinctness.
Thank you. Yes, succinctly, Steve, thank you for that encouragement to continue the work that Council is already doing in seeking alternative sources of funding. Question for Amanda, I think reflecting, and I know you heard our first submitter today, where the point was made that nobody would expect to see their rates decrease, but actually that is the experience for a lot of our commercial sector this time. So do you have a comment on whether our commercial sector shouldn't expect to see their rates decrease?
I wouldn't expect anyone to see their rates decrease, but we don't know what the previous history of that is or whatever the other reasons there could be, and whatever differentiation that there might be for that particular business. So wouldn't be the norm, wouldn't be the expectation, but we don't know the detail.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you. We're online for Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Amanda and Steve. Amanda, question is about the rating impact that of the valuations, which, as you commented on, has thrown up some really disparate results, particularly for the residential sector. One of the consequences is that there will be a net transfer of between $9 and $10 million from the commercial sector to the residential sector, and that is on current proposals. One of the options open to us to mitigate some of these disparate residential rate rises is to make less of a transfer from the commercial to the residential sector. But obviously that would have an impact on businesses. And I wondered if you had a comment on where you thought the balance lies in that scenario.
I've not done any major investigation into that at all. I would like to see Council go back and have a look at everything right across the board and come back with other suggestions, but to flick it from one to the other, I don't think it's necessarily the way to go.
So just to follow up on that, if the valuations have resulted in a transfer of burden from one to the other, you don't support that, is that what you're saying?
I don't want to see the disparate nature of the rates being passed on to individuals that makes some of them, because of their land value, go up above 30%. No, if that's how you've gone about it, by doing a transfer and it's not equitable, you need to look at different ways to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Amanda and Steve. We are out of time for the rest of the questions for today, but thank you very much for coming in and doing your submission, as always. We'll be deliberating on this in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity and for the contribution that you'll give, and us in consulting with you all as well, and the officers as well, so thank you.
All right, we now have our final submission of the night, and that is number 314, Dale O'Reilly. Welcome, Dale.
And my partner, Peter Gore.
Dale and Peter, welcome.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Under the two questions, what do you think of our proposed budget and what changes would you make? I responded by writing that the budget is too optimistic in the current economic climate and that changes need to be made so that rates are not increased at the rate that is suggested. I'd like to give you an example of why the increase in rates is inappropriate. Our son and his fiancée purchased their home just a year ago, having worked extra hard, both having held part-time jobs after leaving high school while one studied and the other was serving an apprenticeship. They continue to work hard, the trade and degree having been accomplished respectively, and one is now working many regular overtime hours and the other is running a small business part-time while also employed and undertaking more studies. We're extremely proud of them and they are not unique. The qualifications, skills and experience of them and their peers are extremely marketable both within New Zealand and internationally, and it would be a shame to lose them to other regions or countries. Their mortgage has just come off fixed term and has increased quite substantially to service. This young couple is the epitome of what society wishes from the next generations. Obviously, they are also facing the increases in fuel, groceries and other basic items. The burden of a large rates increase to them and many others who are in the same position is a little cruel in the current economic climate. To the question, do you have any other feedback? I wrote, stop spending on the PNITI proposed business cases, stop saying that Palmerston North City Council is one community when it's not, and stop saying that your plans will take traffic off urban streets when it is in the same planning that the traffic you are talking about and more will be directed through other urban streets, Bunnythorpe's. The draft annual plan document shows over 17 million in the budget for capital new transport planning. The 10-year plan has allowed for just over 20 million for spending in the 22-23 year. Yet this 22-23 budget is proposing over 26 million. It seems that the planning for the PNITI group of work makes up a large proportion of this year's rates increase and surely needs to be reassessed. In terms of being referred to by Palmerston North City Council as part of one community, I can also provide an example. While being questioned by the panel of commissioners assessing KiwiRail's freight hub proposal, Palmerston North City Council representatives said, this general project in this general location has been identified as a priority by our community leaders in consultation with our community. So in a roundabout way, I would say that while we need to obviously very carefully consider site-specific effects, the idea of this development in this location should not be a surprise really to anyone in the community. He was obviously speaking from a place where the word community refers to the entire jurisdiction of Palmerston North City Council, because no one from Bunnythorpe was included in any of the discussions that led to either the 2010 Joint Transport Strategy or the PNITI group of projects, nor any of the Freight Hub workshops that were held. This is appalling considering Bunnythorpe will be most affected and changed by all of these plans. Another example of this council not acknowledging the individual history and makeup of their outlying communities is that Palmerston North City Council didn't challenge an expert witness of KiwiRail's the social impact expert that resulted in a consideration on which the panel of commissioners concluded that KiwiRail go ahead with the notice of requirement. They considered the average period of home ownership is about 7 years in New Zealand and is slightly longer than the national average in Bunnythorpe, according to the social impact specialist, who went on to say, many of the people living in Bunnythorpe at that time will have chosen to live there with the knowledge of the proposed freight hub. The reason this makes us angry is that the social impact specialist had assumed that once a house is sold, the former owners leave Bunnythorpe. What is not considered is people who have sold their original home in Bunnythorpe to purchase or build another in Bunnythorpe, or those moving out of the family home in Bunnythorpe to move into their own home in Bunnythorpe. We didn't spend over 10 years lobbying Stats New Zealand to finally have Bunnythorpe acknowledged as a populated township just to have organisations choose some statistics to further their own agenda. And we can't believe it wasn't challenged. Peter and I listed the amount of people that we know of who we think have lived in Bunnythorpe for over 20 years and have moved house at some stage during that time. We only counted the adults. It came to 59, 8.43% of 700, the estimated total population. Out of interest, we thought about those we know of who aren't in the above list, but who we think have lived in the same home in Bunnythorpe for over 20 years. It came to 81 people, 11.57%. And those together, 140 people, is 20% of our population. And again, that's only those that we can recall. If we had a community board, which we have requested at 2 representation reviews and been turned down on both occasions, The manipulation of statistics within planning would be picked up on because surely a board would be involved at some level when currently we're completely left out. I guess what we're saying here is if PNCC is not going to support our community, then at least you could have provided us with the formal mechanism to enable Bunnythorpe residents to advocate for ourselves. It has been found that the community of Bunnythorpe will be forever changed. What Bunnythorpe needs right now is for PNCC to just tell it like it is, so that those impacted by the decisions can relate. So that those impacted by decisions and the decisions of other agencies which you plan alongside can be related to. The proposed southern bypass of Bunnythorpe is not a bypass. Call it what it is, a proposed state highway going through the Bunnythorpe community. It's not a Kiwi Rail freight hub which abuts Bunnythorpe, it's a rail freight hub of which a portion is within the township of Bunnythorpe. And it's not a rail hub perimeter road, it's a new road, part of which will go through Bunnythorpe and become a state highway. What Bunnythorpe also needs is a meeting dedicated specifically for representatives from this council to come and speak candidly and honestly to the people of Bunnythorpe about the North East Industrial Zone, the PNITI, and in particular the Regional Freight Ring Road. Thanks to the Bunnythorpe Public Hall Society's hard work in the early years with MDC and the Bunnythorpe Community Centre Association in the later of the last 18 or so years, we finally have a community centre. So there is now a place where large meetings can be held. It's not acceptable to allow a few residents who keep up with the planning but don't hold positions that validate their concerns to be ridiculed because what is being discussed seems too far-fetched to be believed by the residents. Council planning officers and anyone else with an in-depth knowledge need to allow residents to hear what Council has in its planning for Bunnythorpe so that questions can be asked of those who are accountable for promoting the plans. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just see if there are any questions. No, so we don't have any questions for you at the moment. So thank you for coming in and doing your submission, and thank you as well for your passion about the Bunnythorpe community. We do appreciate hearing from you. Thank you. And that concludes our submissions for this afternoon, and in fact, I guess this year. Yep, that's the end of that. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.